recently I had the privilege, really, of doing an intervention with a lady who had unusual trust, unusual faith. Prior to the intervention, her marriage had been non-existent. They were barely roommates. Roommates are nicer to each other. And her relationship with both of her children was close to nothing. She wrote, she said, "This afternoon my husband started telling me that he didn't know how much he could do for Christmas. I asked him to sit down with me and tried to touch him, but he was obviously agitated. He said, the pressure at work, it's just getting to be too much, and my boss can't even guarantee what my schedule's going to be for the next week, before Christmas. So I have no time to shop," and he was just working himself into a froth. It would be so tempting, wouldn't it, at a moment like this, to say something like, and you might have in the past, "You've had all year to shop for Christmas. In fact, you've known for 10 years what day Christmas would be on this year. The reason you have no time is because you put off shopping until 10 days before Christmas, and now your schedule is hectic, which it always is this time of year. So this can't be a surprise to you. These are all excuses. You could have done this so easily." Tempting like, handling a poisonous snake with your bare hands. Tempting, but deadly. She continues, "He couldn't sit down with me. He was that anxious. So we fed the dogs together." Sorry, it's the first time I've heard that described as a joint activity. We fed the dogs together. And when I fed them, he said, "You're feeding them too much." I could see that he was in pain and anxious, and I could see that it was all his. "I remembered to feel loved by you," she said. "I did not defend myself about the dog food comments, and I simply said, okay, then I'll feed them less next time." It would have been, again, tempting but deadly to drop to all fours and eat the excess dog food, but I'm glad you didn't do that. You said, "I'll feed him next time, feed him less." And she said, "I'll be happy to feed him whatever amount he wants." It just was no big deal. Whereas in the past, it would have been a very big deal. This is perfect on your part. Brilliant. I mean, who cares? It's not an issue worth arguing about. It's not even an issue worth talking about. By the way, in case you didn't know, he was pretty much looking for an argument. Because, see, if you'd had an argument about dog food or anything, he could then have been angry and used his anger to justify not doing anything for Christmas. Now, he wouldn't have done that consciously, but he was looking for one. Then he could say, "You're just a terrible wife, and all you ever do is pick at everything, and so this year I'm not going to do any Christmas shopping," which he wasn't going to do anyway, conveniently. We're all so predictable. She continues, "I feel vulnerable like a newborn, sometimes afraid and unsafe, sometimes completely safe and enfolded in love. I feel grateful that I have a daddy. I'm not alone. I don't have to figure out anything by myself." No, you really don't. That's the advantage of having a loving parent. You're doing very well. Not arguing about dog food, genius. So now you text him at work where he's frantic because he's so far behind, and you tell him, you don't have to do anything for Christmas. You tell him you're not behind because it's weighing on his mind. He wasn't able to pick a fight with you to justify he's not doing anything, so it's weighing on his mind. You say, "Don't worry about it." Tell him that you'll get a few things for him, you'll get a few things for you, inexpensive things, from him. You'll get the things from him to you. You'll get a few inexpensive things for the kids. It's nothing, and you'll be happy to do it. So what did she do? She did exactly that. She told him what she was going to do. She went out and did it, and he expressed a huge sense of relief. This fight could have gone all the way through the Christmas season till April, well past Valentine's Day, because that would have been another reason to fight. There wasn't an argument because she refused to engage in one, and she was just loving. Notice, she got the presents for everybody. She did all the work. Not a mention of the word, "It's not fair." Nope. She just loved him. Changed the whole thing. Beautiful. Gosh, that's a great story. And this lady's known about real love for a short period of time. This is from a woman who has been practicing real love pretty much without her husband. He's not really participated much in this. And she wrote, "I've really been judgmental of," we'll call her husband Mike. "I judged him for trying to look good to a friend. He bragged. I saw him around his friend, and he was bragging that he'd done this and that, and looking all big, tough, and manly. And then so I judged him for that, and I judged him for his parenting. And then I even told him one day, I said, I can feel that you're stressed right now, and it's affecting me." The things we say when we feel victimized. "It's affecting me, so please either do something about it or go somewhere else." She said, "I really did say that." The odd thing was, when she said, "I really did say that," I was thinking to myself, I'll bet she really did say that. And yes, it's a pretty nasty thing to say. At the moment, it sounded perfectly reasonable to me in my selfishness. Snottiness often does. If we feel victimized by somebody, there isn't anything we could say that we couldn't justify. Watch a victim justify what they just said. "Oh, you hurt me, so I have the right to cut your head off." That's what victimhood is. Wars are all about victimhood. They're terminal victimhood. Look what you did to me. No, look what you did to me first. Yeah, look what you did to me most. And before long, everybody's dead. She continues, "I thought I was giving him a choice. In other words, change who you are or leave the room." So I was sure I wasn't controlling, that I deserved a peaceful environment, that I was the one seeing the situation clearly, and he was just being shallow and therefore wrong. All lies to justify my own selfishness. Now, how beautiful is that? How beautiful to hear that kind of honesty from somebody instead of continued justification. She said, "I got more and more critical toward Mike throughout the evening and felt more and more alone and miserable myself. And when I sat down next to him and she put the word love in quotation marks, love him. And then in parenthesis, she said, more accurately, I think I went over there to judge his suffering some more. He said something like, I don't know exactly what's going on with you. I don't know what you're doing, but I do know it doesn't feel very good." You really need to tell him that his response here was brilliant. He said, "I'm not going to judge what you're doing and call it something. I'm not going to say you're being a victim. I'm not going to label it. I'm not going to attack you. I'm just going to tell you that it's affecting me in a negative way." That's just pretty perfect for a guy who doesn't read the Real Love books and doesn't go to group and doesn't watch the video chats, and he's probably watching this one. Pretty amazing response. You continue. "I was so blinded by my own self-righteousness," good term, "that I replied, so you're telling me that I'm your problem. I can't deal with that right now." And I left him to himself. Ugh. And then I texted you, and you told me I was being selfish. And then I argued with you, that's me. So you finally said, "Okay, well, just go have a terrible day then." Finally, I just had to laugh at myself. Well, honey, I was laughing as I was writing it. You said, how very silly to insist on being miserable. I think I'm officially out of my stupidness, at least for today. And it only took me a whole day. Just now, I told Mike the truth about my behavior from the whole day, and that I could see what I'd done and how nasty I'd been toward him. And he listened to everything. And I think it felt good to him to hear what I had to say. I actually didn't even say the words, I'm sorry, or I apologize. Instead, I just focused on speaking the truth about my behavior and recognizing how he felt. I was also careful not to expect him to respond any particular way. It went very well because immediately the distance between us was gone. Now, for everybody listening, in case you missed the formula, notice she admitted the truth. She said she was wrong. She paid attention to how he was feeling. Those are all loving acts. And it disarmed him. And poof, a potentially explosive situation, or, a good week's sulk, over. Love is very powerful. You conclude, I just wish I could turn things around sooner and not let it take so long. Oh, in time. You're already doing it way faster than you used to. You're doing it further, faster, deeper. You're getting better in every way. If you got it all right immediately, you wouldn't have anything to learn for the rest of your life. So you're doing just perfectly. This from a woman who had been practicing real love for several years. She said, I saw a sweet moment between my husband and my 6-year-old last week. Unknown to us, he had gotten in a little trouble at school. And on the way to school, Benjamin said, the 6-year-old, Papa, to his dad, I don't want you to ask me any questions about this. I love how smart little kids are before we screw them up. I don't want you to ask me any questions, but I got 25 minutes off recess today. My husband just smiled and said, oh, okay, recognizing that Benjamin had probably already learned from his mistake at school, from his teachers, and he didn't need us, the parents, to walk through what he did wrong and how he could do it differently next time. Sometimes we over-parent, we over-lecture. I was thrilled that Benjamin felt like he could tell us this and not get into more trouble. All of you who have kids, this is brilliant. On his own, the kid told the truth. And from the way he told it, he already learned the lesson. He knew it. He did not need an additional lecture. He did not need an additional consequence. He already got it. That's great parenting. The other day, a woman told me that she had spent all of her life, in her words, with her motor revved up. And knowing her, I could see why she would describe it that way. She said she'd been to her endocrine doctor, and that, in his words, your adrenals, lady, are going to kill you. Always in a hurry, always hyper, always in some kind of adrenaline rush. She said, now that I've been practicing real love for just a few months, I'm peaceful. I look around, waiting for the drama. But now that I understand what's important, there isn't any. I like this. I recommend that to everybody. Pretty much every crisis that we face, not all of them, but almost all, are self-made. As one lady says it, when she gets in a froth about something, she says, wait a minute. She stops right in the middle of her froth and she says, you're going to tell me that I'm making up problems. I said, no, because you already did. We do. We make up our problems. There was a woman here for an intervention. Miserable. And when she went home, she was utterly calm. This is an unusual thing to see somebody change this quickly. Her family was puzzled. She said they looked at her kind of like, what are you taking? You know, like, did somebody give you drugs? She started touching her husband tenderly, gently. He loves it. He writes her love notes and texts from work, which he hasn't done in, 20 years. It's cute how they interact with each other. And she's never seen him like this tender, this thoughtful, this appreciative. He even said the words, quote, I don't know what you're doing, but I really like how you're loving me, end quote. Wouldn't you almost give anything to hear your partner say that? Including giving up being right, for example. The other day, though, he came back home from a hard day at work, and he said, sometimes I just feel so alone, just like nobody understands me. And she said, it's your choice how you feel. I started laughing when she told me that, because poof, he was out of the conversation. He withdrew. He was on Mars. Why? Because she's just barely begun to understand how real love feels. She's just barely begun to change. The only thing she can do at this point is love him, which she had been doing. But for a second, she decided that it might be the right time to teach him after she'd been home for, a few days. I helped her see how he could only take that as a criticism. She said, after our call today, where I told her that he could only take it as a criticism, she said, I called him at work and I told him that I had just finished my Skype call with you and that I was sorry for trying to teach him instead of listening to him last night. Now, those of you who are watching, that is one brave act. The bravest words you'll ever speak are, I was wrong. Really. I'm sorry has almost no meaning. I apologize, same. I was wrong. And he said, wow, that means so much to me. He said that in that moment, the moment when he'd come home, he was so frustrated and he was so grateful that she had the courage to call him and admit her mistake. What does that show you? He remembered that conversation all through the night, all the next morning, and all through work the next day. So when she called to apologize for teaching him instead of loving him, he knew exactly what she was saying. We carry around these hurts for the longest time. This is stunning stuff that she's doing in her home with her husband. Keep it up, kid. And then she concludes, he's on his way out of town on business, and he's feeling heard and feeling loved. I'm so grateful. This is how it works. And it works this way consistently. And all we have to do is do it. But it's not enough to read books about it and talk about it. This is from the mother of Zoe, who's 2 years old. Or about to be 2, or we're just going to call it 2. She's closer to 2 than 3. The mother says, we have a playroom in our apartment building. The room itself is like heaven for kids. But if you add the other children, meaning all the toys and all the, stuff, but if you add the other children in the building to it, it becomes like Animal House, the movie, toddler edition. For those of you who haven't seen Animal House, a classic worth seeing possibly twice in one's lifetime. But it's about the insanity of people's behavior. She continues, Zoe is one of 2 well-behaved kids. And I don't know if the other one counts because the other one has autism and doesn't speak to anybody. Everybody else throws tantrums, screams, pushes, kicks, bites, you name it. Every one of them. The parents and the nannies stay on their iPhones and don't pay any attention to the kid unless some other kid pushes their kid, in which case they yell at the kid. It's so charming. And it's only a microcosm of the world we all live in and that these little kids live in. How else could they have gotten this way? They had to learn it from somebody. They had to see their parents do it. They had to see older kids do it. They see everybody doing it. We train our children better than any corporate training, better than training anywhere. We train our children to have terrible marriages, to be awful parents, to be competitive and angry at work, and more. All these conditions in adults are not accidental. And by the way, not really a choice. When you train a child how to behave, they're not making choices anymore. They're simply trained. So they behave in a trained way, and they simply react to their fears. So all these behaviors we see in adults, these kids were trained to do by the age of 2. She continues. There's one kid in particular who's a terror. He's a 3-year-old boy named, we'll call him Rex. Not accidentally, since the Latin for Rex is king. All the other kids hate him already because he screams, pushes, and grabs toys. Unusually aggressive, even for a male toddler. The kid pushed Zoe once, she emphasizes, about 8 months ago. She didn't get physically hurt, but just started wailing. And as you know, Zoe does not usually cry. She could feel the antagonism coming off this kid in waves. Keep in mind, this is almost a warlike interaction between kids who at the time were 16 months old and 2. For the following 8 months, whenever he appeared in the playroom, Zoe would run into my lap, watch him like a hawk, and refused to play until he was gone. Talk about PTSD. And this is from being yelled at one time at 16 months. You getting the picture yet? Read the book PCSD. We all walk around with severe PTSD. And it's from events like this one. When we're 16 months old, when we were attacked and taught that the world is a dangerous, frightening place to live. Really? It's a beautiful illustration of the effect of anger, disapproval, aggression, just any kind of form of unloving. Now, imagine how this kid lives at home and how he's going to turn out. He'll probably be a CEO somewhere. Now, imagine if you and your husband behaved like this with your 2-year-old all the time. This is how the world gets screwed up. Not because of war. If you ask people, why is the world screwed up? Oh, hunger, war, intolerance, racism, blah, blah, blah. No, they have it completely backward. All of those things result from how we were treated at age 2. And we spend the rest of our lives responding to that horrible paradigm. No joke. And we don't even remember the original trauma. Over and over again, like Groundhog Day. Zoe was profoundly influenced by a 3-year-old. Now imagine how we're all affected in childhood by the Olympic gods we call parents. It's horrifying. She continues, first, wow, are we sensitive to a lack of love? Zoe plays with all the other crazy kids in the playroom, but she avoided this one like the plague because there was an extra level of malevolence at age 3. She only sees him occasionally, like once a month. One time, my mom was in the playroom with Zoe, and Rex pushed her again, and Rex's mother was oblivious. She didn't care. And my mother snarled at the mother. Since I know Vena's mother, I could picture this. Aren't you going to do something? If Vena's mother said that to me, I would do whatever she told me. Oh dear. My mom even apologized later, but after that, anytime Rex would even come near Zoe, his mother, the boy's mother, would lunge at him and yell at him not to touch her. So then what did the boy do? The boy started taunting his mother by getting close to Zoe and trying to push her, but not actually push her, and Zoe's fear tripled. So in response to her son being unloving, what did Rex's mother do? She responded with more unloving. And that's what we all tend to do. When somebody's unloving to us, we become afraid, and then we become unloving. And then, surprise, they become more unloving, and we go down, swirling down the toilet in 10 seconds. The fire spreads, and we're surprised at the heat. There was a man in the Real Love community who recently sent a letter just all over the place. You probably got a copy if you were lucky. If you'd like a copy, certainly write me and I'll send you one. And he just attacked me. I barely know him. Viciously, telling everybody what a horrible, terrible person I was, and copied everybody that he knew. If I were being a smart aleck, I would say all two of them. He copied, but I would never say that. So he copied everybody. The natural response to that would be to what? Write to him, to hit reply to all. That's my least favorite button on a computer. When people say reply to all, and the message was to 150 people, so you get to hear 150 people's opinions, and defend every line. Every line that was wrong. Doesn't work. And when you're tempted to respond to unlovingness with more unlovingness of your own, remember this story. Remember Rex. Remember my story. Remember uncounted stories we've told during video chats. Never respond to people while you're afraid, because you're going to respond unloving. You're going to make it worse. Zoe's mother continues. I explained to my mom that she had unintentionally made the situation worse and spent the past 8 months trying to correct for it. That I had spent the past 8 months. Well, sure enough, Zoe began asking to play with Rex. And the other day, they laid down together on the playroom floor under the same blanket and pretended to nap. I never had the blessing of seeing my children pretend to nap. His mother was obviously dumbfounded and relieved and kept saying over and over, "Who would have guessed this would happen?" And Vina said, "Me, duh," because Vina had been loving to the kid, and so had Zoe. Vina continues. I gave you the punchline before Vina did. How did I work this black magic? Well, I'm glad you asked. Every time Rex did something mean to somebody else and Zoe saw it, now listen, parents, she didn't vilify the kid or stay away from the monster. She said, I explained to my child, less than 2, that the bully was just afraid. I went out of my way to talk to and play with Rex, the bully, the king bully. I made sure that Zoe was always comfortable around him. I always asked if she wanted to leave when Rex appeared, not caring what his mother thought. So, in other words, you were actually Zoe's mother. Wow. This is what parents do. They love and teach. That's what Zoe's mother did. This is our job. Sounds so simple. It's because it is. You loved and taught Zoe. Miracle. And then that's about it. Last week, Rex was eating a snack and Zoe sat next to him and his mother started to physically grab goldfish. That's the little crackers, not the little swimmy ones with fins in bowls. Grab goldfish out of his bowl and give them to Zoe. Forced sharing never works. It's called stealing. And give them to Zoe before I could say anything. Rex screamed. This is the bully. Imagine. Why do you think he's a bully? Because his mother bullies him. And he pushed Zoe lightly, not hurt. And Zoe wailed and ran back to me. I held her in my lap, told her I loved her, kissed her, explained that Rex was afraid that she was going to take his goldfish. Still crying, she said, Mommy, I don't want Rex's goldfish. I said, I know, but Rex didn't know that. Within a minute, she stopped crying and said she wanted to go over and see Rex. And I held her hand. She walked over and saw Rex's mother again reaching for the bowl. I firmly insisted we didn't need his snack, and his mother relented and was relieved. I explained to Rex that Zoe did not want his snack or the toy he was playing with. She simply wanted to sit next to him. So I sat with them for several minutes and then told Zoe I was going back to the bench a couple of feet away. I started reading a book. Within several more minutes, Rex gave Zoe some of his goldfish. How's that for mothering? This is beautiful. We teach children to share by setting an example, by loving, by teaching. You don't teach a child to share by telling them what they have to do or forcing them to share. How many times did we hear this as kids? Our younger brother wanted to play with the ball, and they'd say, now give your brother the ball. It was, after all, your ball. You got it on Christmas, and your parent is telling you have to give it to your younger brother because he's younger. Mostly because the parent doesn't want to have to deal with the squalling younger brother. That could either be called stealing or kidnapping the ball. It's wrong. It's all done by loving and teaching. New subject. At a group on Saturday, someone said, I have felt loved, but I can't describe it very well. I offered that, this is a coach writing, I offered that not worrying about the pain of the past, not being afraid of the future, feeling content and in the present moment is feeling peaceful and is a result of feeling loved. Two other people in group shared that this was a revelation to them. They'd never connected feeling loved to feeling peaceful. It might be something worth sharing on a video chat to help people identify feeling love based on whether or not they're feeling peaceful. Or maybe I just had some really dense people in the group. It has been written about in quite a few books. Peaceful, but I take your point. Peaceful might be the ultimate proof of feeling loved, of being loving and being responsible. The word happiness is actually trickier because people think that some forms of excitement are happiness. Getting a promotion at work, sex, fun, education, whatever. But inner peace, not many people claim to have that who don't. It's hard to fake, too. Want to know how loved somebody feels? I would not recommend this. But how loved somebody really feels is determined, it's easy to tell, by how peaceful they are in the presence of not getting things they want, by having things be stressful or difficult around them, but they still feel peaceful. I had a friend that once said, I think people are more peaceful than you think. I don't think people get angry as easily as you think. And I must have been briefly possessed by the devil, some people would say, for a long period of time. And I just reached up and slapped him in the face. Not hard, but not soft either. And he got angry. And I said, get my point? He said, he was a good friend or I wouldn't have done it. He said, okay, I got it. It's how we respond in difficult situations that determines how genuinely happy or peaceful we are, not by how we behave when everything's going our way. Who can't behave well then? I know a lady who has wandered around in life. That's the best way I can describe it, in life a lot. But lately, she's really been paying attention to the love and teaching that she's been getting. She's had a lot of failed relationships, a lot of jobs, traveled a lot of places. She's had a tumultuous life. She said, I think I've had a less than pretty realization. These realizations are rarely wrong because we find it very difficult to admit that we're wrong, very difficult to admit that we've done something that is ugly. So when somebody says, ooh, I've just seen something about myself that I don't like, it's accurate almost every time. She said, I seem to value getting love from difficult men more than easy ones. Yeah, you really do. Now, my response is to her, because I know her well, but it could apply to a lot of us. And it's natural. If a man is more intriguing to you, which often means more difficult, more complicated, more high maintenance, you value his love more. Men do it with beautiful women. The love of a beautiful woman is worth more. That is a fact. Every guy recognizes that. Stupid, not true, but it is accepted as a truth. So she continues. Oh, this is actually me continuing. But these complicated men and beautiful women are almost always high maintenance, less available themselves emotionally because they're focused on themselves, and much higher maintenance for you. And we just don't need that. All you want is somebody who's capable of loving you, even if he's plainer, less obviously exciting, possibly even slightly boring. She said, as if the challenging or successful man's love is worth more. Yes, and it's always been thus with humans, as I said, and it's worth repeating. A man feels more loved by a beautiful woman than a plain one. Women feel more loved by successful, complicated, wealthy, intelligent men. It's as though some quality in the other person makes their love more valuable. But it's not true. And we have to get this, or we'll always be chasing a dream, an illusion. She said, I'm not sure if I'm explaining this well. Oh, you're explaining it perfectly. This is a biggie for me, she said, and I really want it not to be this way. If I do, then I could well miss out on meeting a guy who is simple and straightforward, dare I say, normal, and dismiss this person as less than and even boring. That's exactly the problem you've been facing. You have dated how many complicated, interesting, wealthy, clever, exciting men who own entire islands, who fly around the world, and how much happiness have you found with them? Grand total, 0. Easy to calculate. If you set stupid standards for a partner, you'll miss the partner that you really want and the partner that you need. She said, I think I may have finally hit upon a big one, and I may need some love and guidance on it. Yeah, it's a big principle to get. It's a big principle for most people to get who are dating, and it will make a big difference in how you look for a potential partner. There was a study done on dating websites, and they analyzed all the questions that people answer to find a partner on Match.com and blah, 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 blah. What do you like to do? Do you like athletics? Do you like to read books? Do you like moonlight walks? Every guy who tells you, I like moonlight walks and to listen to whatever it is your favorite music is that you put in your profile is lying. So they analyzed all of those questions that they asked and correlated it with the future success of the relationship at least a year later. Guess what? They found one question that predicted the success of a relationship a year later. One out of thousands of questions. You probably never guessed what it was. Do you smoke? That's it. So it turns out that if you're a non-smoker, dating a smoker doesn't work. And it doesn't work the other way around. But other than that, all the questions that they ask on dating sites are meaningless. Now, why are they all meaningless? Because they have absolutely nothing to do with unconditional love, which is the only thing that predicts whether a relationship will be together long term. A mother called. She has a 15-year-old girl with a real attitude problem. Just snotty, rebellious, hateful, mouthy, cutting, suicidal. The kid's a mess. So I prescribed the principles of real love, surprise, as opposed to never mind, other available philosophies. So I suggested that they read the book together. The mom, the dad, the kid, that they work on it at home, that she be held accountable for her homework. The daughter absolutely refused to cooperate with what was suggested by me and by the parents. Now, this despite the fact that she's dropped out of school at the age of 15, cutting, suicidal, couldn't be a more miserable girl at 15, but she's refused to comply with anything. I suggested that then consequences be used. For example, taking away the phone, other electronics. The mother said, "Oh, well, we can't do this because then her attitude gets worse. And I'm thinking, A, how could her attitude get worse than suicide? And B, more importantly for you, honey, you are the cause of the attitude. Because any time she resists, you are so afraid of her disapproval that you give in and let a 15-year-old parent herself." The mother said, and I quote exactly, because they were all there, mom, dad, me. She said, "Well, you can't expect me to be perfect." And I said, yeah, I really can. These principles are so simple that I'm describing to you that actually over a period of even a day or two, you can learn to do them perfectly. Remember, I talked earlier about the lady who came home from an intervention and with near perfection started just being tender and loving toward her husband. She didn't know how. She just followed instructions. There are some things that are so easy, we can do them perfectly. Every day, I perfectly don't shoot anybody in the head with my .45. Every day, every single day. And nobody ever gives me any credit. Every day, you perfectly drive down the right side of the road. 99% of the time is unacceptable because then you'll be in jail or dead. If the solution I described for your daughter's problems were chocolate cake, a slice of chocolate cake every time she's unhappy, you could be perfect. You'd have a piece of chocolate cake on hand at all times. There are some things we can be perfect at, and yet it's a favorite thing for parents to say, "Oh, well, you just expect me to be perfect." Yeah, about this, because the guidelines are so simple. And it's not about being a perfect person. It's about perfectly eliminating your fear of disapproval. So the major work that needs to be done is yours. It's not an accusation, it's just how it is. As parents, the price we pay for this fear of disapproval is the lives of our children. If this child continues for much longer in the behavior pattern that she's in, the highest success rate for suicide of any group in the entire United States of all mental health disorders, all of them are teenage girls who cut themselves. So her life is at stake and you're making excuses. No, there are some things that we really can learn to do perfectly. And if we get regular counsel, regular guidance from people, and regular unconditional love from people, it makes the process of perfection much faster and much more thorough. A lady wrote, her husband is Mark and her son is Billy, who's 2 years old, and I'm pretty sure I made those up. Tonight, she said, Billy's room was a mess. We asked him to clean it up, and he whined, and he got upset, and he wouldn't do it. So, what is the teaching here? You love and teach and love and teach. You do that over and over again, especially with a kid who's that young. And when a child then continues to resist, we've been talking about kids a lot today, because, well, frankly, we're all just big kids, then you begin consequences. This child had been loved and taught a lot, even though he was only 2 years old. He knew what he was supposed to do in cleaning up his room. many people will say, well, he's only 2. He doesn't really know what he's supposed to do. He knows exactly what he's supposed to do. That's why he's whining and getting upset. So sure, he knows. If he didn't understand, he might be smiling in anticipation, but he wasn't, was he? He was whining and complaining because he knew. So the parents, it had already been taught they needed to go straight to consequences, which have to be unpleasant. Notice I just say unpleasant. We don't have to torture our children. They have to be utterly consistent. And the consequences have to be immediate. Children can't ever be allowed to think that bratty, entitled behavior is acceptable. And it starts at 2. It actually starts earlier than age 2. Because if you wait to be consistent with a kid when they've lived in a world of complete chaos until they're 15 or 16 or 17 years old, usually you're pretty darn too late. So these 2 had experimented with consequences, the parents, and discovered that Billy hates the consequence of, like, for example, when they would go out for walks in the mall. I did this with my kids, only a couple of them, but they all knew that the rule was you could go anywhere you wanted to, in a store, in the mall, the park, anywhere, as long as you can see Dad. That's the rule. And they were pretty diligent about it. They'd look over their shoulders every, few seconds just to check and make sure that they were within sight of me. And if they didn't keep the rules, if they didn't stay within sight of Dad and we all moved off into another direction and they stayed behind playing and not paying attention to what was going on, then the natural consequence was that they couldn't keep playing. So we would either put them in the car or we would put them in one of those harnesses. Everybody's seen little kids walked around a mall in a harness like a dog, which makes everybody smile. It doesn't hurt the kid. They just hate being restricted. They just hate it. And parents use it in parks and in, busy traffic for the same reason you put a harness on a dog. So they learned that this kid hates that. And so they would just say, oh, well, then we'll just put you in your harness, and then they would fasten it to the door. But the mother did not react immediately with the consequence. She just let Billy whine and complain. And Mark, her husband, brilliantly got out the harness and said, I've got this. Perfect response on the part of the husband. He was doing the right thing, and he didn't correct his spouse. He didn't say, well, we can't count on you to be reliable. Well, you're never reliable. Well, how come you ever... He could have been critical all day long. He didn't do any of that. He just said, I'll take care of this. In other words, you go relax and I'll take care of this hard job. The woman continues. She said, but I didn't listen. And I said, okay, now you can ask him nicely again. But Mark just repeated, I've got this. And she writes, laughter, ha, ha, ha. So you go and tell Mark how smart he's getting at being a parent. Then she said, I realized how controlling I was being and how I was too blurry and confused to do or say anything productive. So I told Mark that I was not in a place where I could be kind and loving and that I needed some time alone. He sighed, and let me be. I tried not to let that affect me, and I just focused on remembering that you love me, other people love me, and I sat like that for, 10 minutes or so by myself. And my feelings toward Mark and Billy changed. I just wanted to get back out there and enjoy being with them. So I did. I hugged Mark, I kissed Billy, everything was great, and Mark didn't sulk when I came back either, which was pretty impressive. He was just happy to see me. Your husband is a lovely man. He's not as involved in studying real love as you are. He doesn't go to real love groups, but he lives it. It's a beautiful thing to see. Then you say, later in the evening when I felt more peaceful, I told him that when I had said I needed some time alone, he had sighed. Now, for all of the rest of us who are listening, notice that she waited until later to talk about this when she was peaceful, not when she was upset. That was brilliant. And I told him that it didn't feel good to me when he sighed because there was an air of disappointment or exasperation. And in response to my telling him that, he sighed. But then he quickly caught himself and started laughing and said, I guess I just sighed, didn't I? Beautiful. I mean, this guy doesn't read the books and he lives real love. It's gorgeous. This is how you recover from mistakes. You just see them and laugh about them. You don't have to apologize for them. You don't have to feel bad about them. You just see and learn. He said something about how he knew that probably didn't feel good to me when he sighed, but that it was the least unkind he could be in the moment. That's actually pretty insightful. It's a lot of progress from the past. Sometimes the least unkind is the best we can do. Sometimes we need to recognize that simply not being unkind is the best we can do, and it's the best other people can do, and be satisfied with it instead of picking constantly at ourselves and everybody else that we have to do it perfectly. And I told him that I wasn't really asking him to stop sighing. I was just telling him it doesn't really feel good when he does. And he said, well, I guess all I can do is my best. And I agreed. And we both laughed together. Perfect. This is how a couple works together. They learn, they make mistakes, but they learn together. They admit their mistakes. They laugh about them. They're growing closer by the day. And it's nothing dramatic. It's just one little step at a time. But they're infinitely closer than they were a year ago. Unrecognizably closer. And this is how we do it. Steadily, progressively. We find the love that we need in our lives. We trust it. We remember it instead of throwing it out with the trash every time something difficult happens. And then gradually we learn to share the love we have with other people. And then we become part of that infinite and eternal flow that brings happiness to everybody who's in it. It's an absolute guarantee. We'll see you next week.